We are now live.
Welcome, everybody, to the Asheville Transit Committee, March 21st, 2023. We meet on the third Tuesday of the month, virtually from 5 to 7 p.m. The Transit Committee is a volunteer citizen board designed to offer input and guidance to the Asheville Transit System and City Council. We do not set or change routes, control Asheville transit budget, or have authority over staff, drivers, or the management company. We are a group of citizens like you who are here to ensure community concerns are taken into consideration when setting public transit policy. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and take roll call. I'm Harvey Harold. Sandy Aldridge, are you here today? Sandy Aldridge? Georgia Burks?
Yes.
Jo- Glad you're here, Georgia. Excuse me. Bill Loftus?
I'm here.
I barely hear you, Bill.
Is that
Philip
better?
Lucerno? Colin is out today. Brandon Oliver. Brandon Oliver. We do not have quorum as yet, but hopefully we will have people join, committee members joining in a little later. I see we have Jessica here today. I saw Amber, uh, Catherine, Nicole, and Barry. I'm glad you're back. And we have LaShawn as well. Glad all my staff is here today. We can't vote on the agenda at the time. We do have public comment, and I'll go ahead and read the rest for public comment on this day. We welcome public input in our meetings. You're allowed to comment on any matter under consideration prior to a final vote. If you have something to say, raise your hand and the chair will recognize you. There are also two public comment periods, one at the start of the meeting and one at the end. Any person addressing the committee is limited to 3 minutes. However, a group may have a single spokesperson who will be allowed 10 minutes. The committee will receive written information from any individuals or groups that cannot conclude their presentations within these time limitations. If you would like to have any item discussed in more detail as part of our agenda, we ask that you speak with a member of the Trans Committee in order to have that item addressed during our next meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Your input is valued. On to public comment. We have Art C today. That's if for those that don't know, that's the Asheville Regional Transit Coalition. And I have been with them for some years now, and I find them to be very effective in their decision making, and met a lot of interesting individuals in city government and county government as well. Just to name a few: Just Economics, Children First, Communities, AARP, me on Transit, Sierra Club, Mountain True, Community Organizer, and Commissioners and Council. At this time, Carmen Guevara, on behalf of Art C, will be providing public comment on the city county joint transit study. Carmen.
Thank you, Harvey. I'm sure you all have reviewed your agenda and you know that the city staff will be going over a presentation about a feasibility study for the city and county. And so we ARTC have really been advocating for this to happen. And so I just have a statement that we've prepared together to share with you about the joint study. We're advocating for a joint study between city and the county, analyzing transit operations as well as potential revenue streams and governance models. The first step would be to explore the city and county activity through strengthening collaborative transportation planning. We hope that the study will look at equitable access, connecting residents of the city and county to jobs, workforce development training, education, healthcare, childcare, food, and affordable housing. Capital needs being fleet, facility, and operational potential, and operations needs being frequency, hours of service, ease of transfer, and the length of trips. Increasing ridership and decreasing carbon footprint of transportation, connection to park and rides, zero fare or free fare, carpool, van pool, land use and planning, better mobility for visitors and tourists. And potential benefits, as we see them, would be having a transit authority, dedicated funding for transit, governance models, cost saving, the reduction of duplicate operations and capital investments, and reduce stress and reduce need to have downtown parking. And that's our statement, but we are really advocating for this to take place. And I think that it would really help so many of us in the city and in the county. Thanks.
Thank you, Carmen, for that presentation. I see Brandon joined us, and we have a quorum at this time. Brandon, are you still there?
Yes, sir. I'm not sure what's going on with my my screen. It keeps jumping off and on, but I'm here.
Okay. At this time, we'll go ahead and review and approve some minutes. March 21st, 2023 agenda. May I have a review and for approval of these minutes? Okay. Kim, go ahead. Hold on for a minute.
This is Kim Roney, your liaison. I just wanted to let you know that I see you have a package of minutes to review, and I have seen it done that unless there was a need to make amendments, a group could make a motion to review and approve all of the items in your call to order, sort of the March 21st, December 20th, and February 21st, if you wish.
I do. Thank you, Kim. In that case, may I have a motion to approve all of the minutes under call to order?
I make a motion to approve all the minutes on the call to order.
May I have a second? May I have a second, please? Hello?
Can you
Georgia
second
or
that,
Bill?
Mr. Chair?
Huh?
May I have a second?
This bill, I
Yeah, you
second.
have a second.
Thank you. Thank you, Georgia.
I'm sorry.
I can barely hear you, Bill.
Oh,
Okay.
I can hear you, Georgia. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay. May I have I'm gonna do the roll call again for the minutes. Harvey votes yay. Georgia?
Yes.
Bill?
yes.
And Brandon. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. 2022, the Commission's annual report, the committee's annual report. has already been sent to multimodal. It has been reviewed. It's been submitted and approved by Multimodal Commission. And at this time, we'll move on to the election of chair and vice chair. At this time, I would be excited to continue as chair. Is there anyone else that would like to be in would like to be voted in as chair or considered as being chair? If not, we'll go ahead and move on to a vote. As far as me continuing to be the chair. Georgia?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes. Pass.
Brandon?
Yes.
And Harvey votes yes. Sandy Aldridge, have you joined the meeting for today? Sandy Aldridge. Well, maybe Sandy will be on a little bit later.
So you just called
since-
the roll. You just called roll. Did you just call roll 2 minutes ago?
I did for the vote me in as chair, Georgia.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okie dokie. We'll have to come back to that. I'll wait till later on and then we'll come back to this part of the agenda. Old business. Joint city and county transit plan update. Staff will provide an update on the progress of the joint city and county transit study and discuss initial efforts, including primary scope of the work framework.
Thank you, Harvey. Jessica Morris, City Transportation Assistant Director. We have a brief presentation for you today. This is something that staff worked with county staff, so city and county staff worked to put this presentation together. And we'll go over some of the key takeaways first, just to kind of frame up the conversation. And we're going to be looking for your feedback on this after we get through the presentation. But some of the key takeaways we just want to stress are that we are at the very beginning of this project, of this effort, and we are here to get your input early on in this process. And we want to talk about today what the must-have items are or topics that you want to see us include in the scope of work that will ultimately move this project forward. We'll be doing a request for proposals in a few months, and then we'll be hiring a consultant or consultants to help us through this project, which will be, kind of a long-term effort. So right now, we just want to figure out what are the must-haves that we need to have in this project. We want to make sure that everybody knows that the city and the county will be equal partners in this. So although the city might be the ones that have the contract with a consultant, city and county staff are going to be at the table for every part of it, and will be equal partners in all pieces of the project. We also want to ensure that this effort will be data driven, and we of course want to make sure that community engagement and collaboration with the community, with the riders, non-riders, everyone will be a critical component of all of the entire process throughout. So here's a graphic kind of summarizing where we're at. We are what I would consider to be the pre-project phase. So we haven't really started anything. We're just kind of getting our ducks in a row. We're trying to get initial input. We're trying to frame up what the scope of work is going to look like. We're trying to get a budget approved. We haven't gotten that far quite yet. And after that, we'll be working to put together a full scope of work and request for proposals. Like I said, that would then go out and we'd hire a consultant, execute a contract, all those things. So all of those bullets there are meant to summarize this pre-project preparation phase. Then once we've got a consultant or a consultant team and a contract, we will kick off the project itself. I'm expecting sometime in the fall, maybe September, October. And we think that it'll probably be 12 to 18 months. But we also will firm that up more once we have a consultant under contract. And then, of course, after we complete this and we have a plan to move forward, that's when you go into the implementation phase, which could be, anywhere from 1 to 10 years or longer. So, as I said, we're very much in the infancy of this. So this is what we think will be the major sections of the scope of work. And each of these bullets, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. But we expect to have some kind of purpose statement. What is it that we're looking to do? Guiding principles. We think that will be the principles that will guide us through this entire process. We'll talk a little bit more about the timeline, goals and objectives. We'll go into more detail about the major pieces of the actual scope of work. Talk a little bit about government collaboration and community engagement. So this is a purpose statement that the city staff and the county staff work together on. And essentially what we've put together, and this can be revised if necessary, but this statement is meant to try to encapsulate everything that we hope to accomplish. So we want to develop a joint transit master plan to improve the quality, accessibility, and long-term economic financial sustainability of public transit services in the city and the county for both residents and visitors. Both local governments seek to improve transit services for residents and visitors, determine the best governance structure, and identify sustainable financial resources. These are the 3 guiding principles that we have come up with, represent both the city and the county equally, and their collective but also individual goals and needs. Be objective and data-driven in the process, the analysis, and the recommendations that come forward, and be collaborative and involve the community throughout the process. So the goals and objectives are a little bit different than the guiding principles, a little bit more detailed, but are still pretty high level. So these are some bullet points that we came up with for goals and objectives. They're not in any particular order, but they touch on some of those topics that we want to make sure that whatever we do and whatever plan we end up with, that we have recommendations that have these things in mind. So equity, of course, reducing disparities for communities and people facing barriers. We want a connected network that strategically links and connects employment, recreation, key activity centers, and other sorts of important destinations, system attractiveness, and that really speaks to convenience, quality, and reliability of our existing system, access and mobility. So this is talking more about potential service increases. So things like adding frequency, adding new routes, extending hours, and so on. Financial sustainability and governance. So having a dedicated funding source, adding additional sources of revenue, and how our financial, how we structure how this system gets paid for. Environmental sustainability. So looking towards having an impact in reducing greenhouse gases and carbon emissions. And then economic growth, strengthening economic ecosystems. So that's looking at things like job creation, job access, workforce development, and those types of things. So getting into the actual scope of work. So these are the things that we would expect the consultant or consultant team and the city staff and the county staff to work together and get input on all of these different things, analyze these different components. So of course, looking at our existing conditions, our existing operations, our financial resources, our fleet and facilities, looking at our existing plans and policies. So we have the existing transit master plan, and the county has some transit plans as well. Not, the intention is not to throw those in the trash can and start all over. It's looking at those things, updating them, and making sure that the key things that were identified that were important then, if those things are still important, then we continue those through this process as well. We'd also want to look at future demand. So how is our urban area and other areas in the county going to develop and grow and change over time? Our demographics going to change, our travel patterns going to change, and how would that impact the transit system? So some other major components that we would want to develop comprehensive recommendations for and prioritize those recommendations would be related to the governance structure. So as Carmen kind of touched on in her statement, is it we have a regional transit authority? Do the city and the county combine forces, or does the governance structure still remain as it is today with us doing kind of separate but coordinated activities? How do we collaborate together intergovernmentally? What does the service delivery model look like? What is the service design? And service design is speaking to our routes and our frequency, and our coverage, like where are we going to? Capital and fleet. So capital consists of our fleet and our facilities. And that's something I think that we have to start paying a lot more attention to, and what our existing transit master plan didn't really take into account. But obviously transit is a lot more than just the operations. We have to make sure we have the fleet and the facilities to help do those things. So as I mentioned, carbon reduction. So if we wanted to get, more electric buses or more hybrids, what does that look like in terms of our service and our finances as well? Fare structure and policy. So that could include looking at zero fare again and seeing how that would impact our finances, but also our operations. And then a big component of this is the financial side, right? So transit is not an inexpensive thing to do. We need to make sure that we have the proper financial, the proper revenues in place to do what we need to do and maintain our system and grow our system. And then, of course, implementation. So one of the things that we would expect to happen, as I mentioned, we'd have community collaboration throughout the process. I think as soon as we had a consultant on board, and we'd be looking for a consultant team that has very deep experience in not just transit projects, but in doing community outreach, engaging with the community, and getting input from the community. We would expect to develop with them some kind of plan that outlines how we would do the community engagement throughout the entire project. So that would probably be one of the very first steps that we all worked on together, including with the transit committee and other committees, is developing that communications engagement and collaboration plan. Of course, the city and the county staff will work together with the project team and make sure that we maximize that participation and involvement across the county. And as I said, it's going to be a critical component, and we would expect to include, of course, include our existing riders, but we'd also want to try to get some input from non-riders, and then, of course, residents, visitors, businesses, institutions, and other service providers. So there's a ton of different ways that we could do community engagement. These are just some ideas. I would expect that we would probably do many, if not all of these things. So, you know, we would definitely want to have some kind of project website. I foresee us having focus groups or interviews. We likely would also have a project steering committee, and I would imagine that would be made up of city and county folks. We could have ambassadors potentially. That could be something like transit committee members helping to get the word out and collect information and input from other people in the community. And then, of course, we'd have our existing committees and groups, and then there'd be workshops and open houses and events, surveys, online and in person, and media. And I'm sure I'm missing some things, but we would seek to get all of this in great detail and have a plan in hand as one of the first steps when we get a consultant on board. So right now, what we are doing is gathering input on this scope. I'm calling it a framework. We're just trying to get these major components identified. So today we're talking with you guys, and then tomorrow we'll be talking to the Multimodal Commission and doing this same presentation. It's possible that we could set up a time to come to the next ARTC meeting if that's of interest to that group. And then I do know that we're going to give a presentation to our Planning and Economic Development Council Committee, I think at the April 10th meeting, if I have that right. And we'll talk more with county staff about whether there's any other groups they would like us to get in front of. But ultimately, what we're working towards is gathering all this input, putting it into a document that will ultimately get developed into a scope of work that would be more detailed. And then we also need to get budget approval. So city staff has put in a budget request, county staff has put in a budget request. And so those are going to be moving forward through both council process and county process for the budget. And assuming that we get approval for that budget, we would move pretty quickly to get a request for proposals together and published and issued. hopefully maybe as soon as July, right, when the budget's approved. And then after that, you know, we would receive proposals from consultants. We'd have some kind of selection committee to help us choose a consultant team. And then once that's done, there's the paperwork pieces where you have to get a contract together and execute it. So sometime in early fall is when I would expect us to get to a contract approval, and then we'd most likely be kicking off the project in earnest in early late fall. So just rehashing the key takeaways. Again, we're at the very beginning. We are trying to get input on the must-have things to put in our scope of work. And then these last 3 bullets are really just to emphasize that this is going to be a joint effort, an equal effort between the city and the county. It's going to be data-driven, and we fully expect community engagement to be a major part of the whole process. So, thank you guys. I'm happy to answer any questions. Hopefully this provided some fodder for you guys to give us some input and put your thinking caps on. So please, I welcome any questions or ideas. What have you got for us?
All right. I have my hand up first. I like the fact that we're included, and as well as, you know, Artsy and other groups, communities, and the public events sounds like a real good idea. And being public ambassadors, I'm going along with that. And, you know, putting out surveys, that's going to take some diligence doing that. And a lot of meetings getting the word out. But I'm glad we're moving forward. But I'm here for the long haul. And that's about all I had to say on that right now, but I'm willing to put in the work. Thank you.
Thanks, Harvey.
Mm-hmm. Bill?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Jessica, that's great. Congratulations. I hope that can get moving. I got a couple of things. First is just, I mean, there's a lot of big rocks here, right? There's obviously just real heavy duty scenario analysis, like what's the best delivery model? And there could be a zillion different ways to look at that. So that might take a certain type of consultant. Then you've just got how do you mash 2 organizations together and come out whole and come out good? That's an organizational type of thing. It's a different thing to study. It may well be a completely different type of consultant. And then, of course, open up the financial box and how do you pay for something that might take yet a completely different type of consultant. So is the idea to have kind of all those big things merged together and have one firm be capable of delivering all that stuff?
That's a good question. My sense is that a project of this scale will be a lead firm, likely, with sub or partner firms. I will say that it is a lot to put into one thing, but this is a very common type of planning effort across the country. So there are firms and teams that have done this and continue to do this in other places. So there are transit consultants that I'm aware of and have worked with, and Amber has as well, that have experience in all of these areas. So they I think what we'll be looking at is likely a lead firm. They could have some sub-consultants, but I wouldn't expect it to be, like 5 or 6 sub-consultants. It's probably going to be teams of maybe 2 to 3 partnering firms. That's my expectation.
Okay.
If I had to take a guess.
Okay. And I guess that'll come out in the vetting of the consultants.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the best way for us to, I've got a laundry list of things I'd like to include. How do I get that to you guys so that it's engaging?
Well, I certainly think that it's worthwhile you may not want to read every single one of your laundry list items, but if there's some major things, I think it's worthwhile to talk about them now so that the group can hear them. But also, you're always welcome to send us an email with notes, and we'll make sure that we try to cover as much as we can, and ultimately when we put together a more fully fledged out scope of work.
Okay. Well, I'll just go down a little bit of a list just to tee it up.
Sure.
And then,
Okay.
So most of my attention is just scenario analysis, like what are the different models that transit systems run and to be effective for our city. So I would definitely like to see rigorous total cost of ownership analysis on large buses versus smaller capacity buses. And we've got a kind of an interesting thing to play with there, because I know the county runs smaller buses and we run big buses, so there ought to be a pretty good case study there. And as we've shared, it gets down, and I think it needs to be done in the nation of the current volumes, and then secondly, look at it from a standpoint of increased frequency. The idea of being smaller, if less expensive, should be able to increase frequency, which we all want. So I think that should be a heavy, rigorous analysis as part of this outcome, just so we know whether we want to favor larges or smallers or both in some kind of a hybrid system. I think that's a big one. Another one is I'd like them to study on-demand transit systems, where the last mile and the first mile are on demand, and it's some type of intelligent connection between shuttles and corridors, so that people can be picked up where they are instead of expecting them to walk half a mile to get to a bus stop. So I would really like to see if we could get something like that accomplished, because I think we're somewhat captive to fixed route systems. And so the more we can have a intelligent on-demand system, the more utilization we'll get out of the vehicles, and the more frequency and so forth we'll see. So I'd love to see that as part of it. The third thing I'd like to see in terms of the scenario analysis is I would like to have a complete revisit of our current hub model, where all routes converge at one spot downtown, and there's a lot of bus dwell time waiting for everybody to show up and kind of gather at the same time. There's probably a lot of different ways to skin the cat. The one comes to my mind is where the corridors intersect with a downtown circulator system that's kind of always running. So there's not a dwell time. It's whenever it drops at the circulator, then within 10 or 15 minutes, there's going to be somebody to transfer to, or even less. So I think the advantage I just think the hub system is old school, and I think there's new school options that need to be studied, because it seems so fixed and rigid and infrequent. But I've never studied it before. I think it ought to be studied. And then along with that, and this kind of goes over on the financial side, if we had a downtown circulator solution that it's both for visitors and residents, I would like to see TDA fund the circulator part of that system. And then that might open up the analysis into lots of different options if we get some partnering from TDA. So I think that would be favorable from a visitor perspective. It's along the kind of things that visitors would want. I mean, envision San Francisco cable cars, for example, things like that could be part of our total system. And we might get out of it higher frequencies on the corridors. So that's the other angle there. I know when we took the trip to the garage, and I may have misunderstood it, but I think what we saw there is that every single bus goes to the garage every single day to pick up cash and to be cleaned. I would like them to study an option where there is not a required return to garage on a daily basis. I know there's pay systems that don't require cash. There's non-pay systems entirely. And from the cleaning perspective, I know when you get on an airplane, they clean airplanes at the gate. So I don't know why we can't clean buses at our gate. So what that opens up is options about where the garage can be. That garage is a piece of extremely valuable real estate that could be used for lots of things. And maybe if we don't have that requirement, that garage could be anywhere in the county. And then it gives us some other options. So that's another thing I think ought to be studied. So that's mainly it. But one other thing in terms of financial, I would like to see an integration between our planning and zoning and transit funding. I sat in on the last city council meeting and we approved a large development on Lister Highway. And it qualified for incentives. The developer actually was paid about $25 million to put that development up because they met a lot of requirements that allow that to happen. What occurred to me was that I'd like to see about restructuring those type of situations. So rather than give them so much money, maybe expect a developer to pay for a circulator route on the highway that development exists on, meaning that for roughly $500,000, you could pay for every 15-minute cycle going up and down Leicester Highway. And the developer, why don't we ask the developer to pay for that? And here's the advantage for the developer. The site was filled with parking. They could have squeezed more buildings on that site if there was frequent transit. But there's probably a requirement for parking because of our frequency, right? But what if we opened up the game and said, let's have more frequent service, ask the developer to pay for it, and guess what? You can put up another 10 units and you're going to make more money. So I think I want to see an integration between planning and zoning rules like that we saw in the last city council, and have that fund transit options like the one I just suggested. That doesn't have to be the only thing. I'm just using that as an example of a deliberate integration between planning and zoning and funding so that transit gets more money from people like that. I think that ought to be studied. So that's my list of the moment.
Thanks, Bill. I think on that last note, one of the limitations that, well, we have a lot of limitations. Many of them have to do with state law. And so I think as part of that existing conditions analysis, going beyond our own policies and plans, and also kind of talking a little bit about how state law limits our ability to do things. So for example, we don't have the ability to require developers to provide funding for transit. A lot of states have the ability to charge impact fees and have them help pay for improvements to roads or transit or water systems or sewer or what have you. And we do not have that ability in North Carolina. And the TDA, there's some similar limitations there. So I think it's worth, that is a part that needs to be included and understood fully, because in my experience, we have a lot more limitations on financial resources than any place I've ever worked before, which is, problematic for us if we want to maintain and grow our system. So that's something that we need to include.
I hear you. I've also heard from a very reputable person that our state law can be challenged and has been challenged by other localities and municipalities. So I'm sure hope nobody stands up and said we can't do it because the state says we can't. Well, I think we need to challenge the state when something makes good sense, and other people have fought the state battle and won. I don't think we ought to just necessarily just not try. One man's opinion, but it can be overcome because it has been done.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for your insight. Okay, Joseph likes that as well. Is there any other public comment? Other comment from any of the committee members? I would love to hear it.
Sir,
Go ahead, Georgia.
I don't know if this is the proper time or not to say what I'm getting ready to say. If it isn't, cut me off. In the evening, at this time, between this time and 7, I am eating. I'm recovering from a stroke. I'm recovering from it, and that is the time between 5 and 7 is the time that I prepare my food, and plus I have therapy at that time, and it's for the better. But I was wanting to make a suggestion that we turn our meetings back until from 3 to 5 as it was before. There are a lot of people on this committee that works all day and gets off at 5. And it's a little much to me to get off. If I work all day, I wouldn't want to have to come to a meeting or anything, but go home and keep my shoes off. But think about it. Some of the people on this committee works all day. I know it's a couple, maybe 3 people that do not work. And then you got other people that do work. And when they get off of work, they work all day, have to be work at 8, 9. Some of them have to be work at 7:30, and then work until 5, and then come to a meeting. I just think that's a little too much for most individuals. That's like, I don't know. But I was wondering can we vote on that back to 3 to 5?
I'll let Jessica go ahead and answer that. She's in the queue. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thanks, Harvey. Thanks, Georgia, for bringing that up. it is something that we probably should talk about again. And I don't know if we want to talk about it during this meeting, or perhaps maybe we talk about it at our April meeting. But we were wondering, staff was actually talking about that earlier today, whether it might be better to go back to our earlier time. It sounds like nobody has any more comments at the moment about this this project that we're going to do. And I think this was the last agenda item under old business. So Harvey, as the chair, if you would like to have a conversation separately about the time of the meeting, we could either do that today, or we could formally put it on the agenda in April.
Jessica, I would love to put it on the agenda for April.
Okay. Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that
that
would be a
means,
good
Thank you,
thing.
Georgia.
That would be a good thing to
Yeah.
discuss, to see if everybody is on point for that.
Can I
And we
ask
can
a
meet
question?
and have all our members there.
okay, so can I ask a question? That means April meeting will be at 5 again.
Yes.
Okay.
And we will be discussing the time change.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Kim Roney has a hand raised. Go ahead, Kim.
As your liaison, I just had two quick things. One is, it wouldn't be unprecedented to do a poll to see if a 3 or 5 start time worked before having to notice the meeting. It could still be on the agenda for in April for like the future meetings, so that the public could engage more in that conversation if needed. But several of the boarding commissions, as they're moving to in person or staying virtual, are realizing the need to shift. So first of all, that wouldn't be uncommon to poll for the 3 o'clock time. The second thing is, I didn't see this really useful presentation in the meeting documents, and maybe I missed it, but if it hasn't been sent out to the transit committee, it might be a really good document to be able to refer to as folks are considering the scope of work.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. That's a really good suggestion. We've done that in the past and I forgot, but what we could do is send out a poll to all of the members about their preference for meeting time, and do that in the next week or so. And then we could make a decision to have the April meeting earlier based on those results. And we'd coordinate that with you, Harvey. And then,
Okay.
the presentation, we will send that out. Actually, I'll make a PDF of it and send it to Nicole, and she can send it out tonight. And we just finished it up this morning, so that's why we weren't able to get it out there earlier. But we'll do that today. Thanks.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Georgia, for bringing that up, and maybe putting us in another time frame that would be agreeable with everyone. We hope that will be as we move forward. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to discuss any more on the framework of the joint city and county transit plan? Okay, I don't see anybody up with their hand up. Okay, I was just wanting to ask, did Sandy, did you join the meeting? Okay, we don't have her in here yet. Okay, transit committee member updates and rider experiences. Do we have any rider experiences? Any updates? Bill, are you talking?
No.
Okay, you were lit up. I was wondering about that.
Oh,
Okay. I always find some things to discuss as far as rider experiences and being out there. Taking the bus is I love riding the bus and talking with the drivers at the station whenever they have a little chance to, and while we're riding as well. And I would like to name a few of the drivers that I'd like to say something about. Selena K on the S1, Mark on the S4, Mike on the S1, and Steven. And whenever I find things that are necessarily not going the way they should, I usually give LaShawn a call and or leave a message at transit. But most of the time I call LaShawn and leave her a message on our answering machine. That way it gets taken care of. And I appreciate her for that. Whether it's something on the bus or whether it's something outside of the bus, trash at the bus stops, something up at transit that's not going right. But things do get handled, and that's the most efficient way that I've seen to do it, by letting staff know, and when they'll make time to straighten out whatever it is. And I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Harvey.
You're welcome, LaShawn. And thank you for all that you do. And as I said, Barry hadn't left yet. I was wanting to thank you, Barry, I'm glad you're back.
Well, thank you, Harvey. No, I am here, and I have not left. Okay.
Yeah, that replacement action wasn't getting it for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I like my Barry. Okay, anybody else? As always, I always encourage my committee members to get out and ride the bus, get the experience, because it's one in a lifetime some days. Some days aren't, some days are, but it's always an experience. So tell me, especially the 330 riding on the W1, it's something. But yeah, you need to try it some days. Okay. Departmental updates. I had something on there. Does anybody have anything to say about departmental updates besides me?
I included the memo of our February activities. If anybody has any questions, there's just an update on our comprehensive review, the triennial review, which is ongoing and will continue until likely our virtual site visit, which will be in August, end of August, early September, is still tentative. Staff is working and gaining and getting more information for the reviewers that we're uploading to the Dropbox. It's a continual process. There's an update. Y'all requested at the last meeting. There will be a monthly update on the joint city-county transit study. That just included the framework discussion that we had today, as well as it just indicated the meetings that we all attended, that staff attended. There's a couple updates on 5307 grants. There were additional funding left over after the initial call for projects. So the city is applying for an additional project for S3, which would supplement and help us with the expense of providing that service. It's an additional $153,000 more. That will be going to council next week, as well as our 5303. It's our planning funds that help supplement personnel expenses within the transit planning department. And that is also going to council next week. It's an annual application that we do to the NCDOT, the Integrated Mobility Division. So there's just a few updates. there's any questions, feel free to ask, or if any additional information wants.
Was what next? On the GLIC buses, projected production schedule for April. Is that the time they're gonna start making them, or is it says 2023, April 2023?
Yes, and it is looking like it is on track, and maybe even possibly be early. It might be earlier because we've also received word from GILIG that they would like to have our pre-production meeting. So that's a good sign that everything is in process. So yes.
Okay, and the 3 and the 4, is that 2 times that we ordered the same kind of a bus?
Yes, the 4 GILIGs were just that's a new purchase order that we did last month. Those are replacing the vicinities, and we just placed that order, and those should be on production in December. And they are for the same bus. They're diesel, 30-foot, 29-foot, 30-foot buses.
And all these buses, I'm hoping that they are, but I just want to ask for my own knowledge. These will be talking buses.
Yes, they will have the capabilities and the IT technology to be talking buses.
Okay. It seems to help people out a lot. Okay, I think that was the only, I just want to know about those 2 things. 3 things, really. Okay, that's it for me as far as the operational updates, departmental updates. Anyone else? Brandon, do you have anything?
I've been riding the 170 and the W1 and W2 here recently, and the bus drivers are cool. They're cool. They're attentive. I don't hear any complaints about. I mean, I did hear some complaints about the 170 in the early morning. I missed someone twice, but I think they said that driver is no longer a driver. So I just wanted to say WE2, and yeah, really good job. Wanted to give them a little shout out real fast. That's it.
Thank you, Brandon.
Amber and Jessica, did y'all get that? My internet wasn't doing a nickel on that one. What did he say?
Yeah, I think we got most of that.
Yeah, the drivers on We2, he'd been riding 170, W1 and We2. Bus drivers were attentive. I believe there was a problem with one, but he indicated that they are no longer driving. Is that correct, Brandon? That's what I received. You're cutting out a little bit.
Okay. Is this better? Is it better now? Yeah, I went to do a rider experience time, but it cut off. Sorry, y'all. Ma'am, you get it. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Oh, there was one other thing I meant to mention on the transit committee member updates. I forget his name. He's the big guy that drives the S6 all the time. He said he wanted to grow up, he wanted to be just like me. He's a riot. Make sure you tell him, Mr. LaShawn.
I know exactly which driver you're talking about.
He's a riot, I'm telling you.
I'll tell him.
Okay. Informal discussion. Well, operation updates. We're through with that. Informal discussion and public comment. Is there any? If there are no other forms of discussion, the next meeting we have will be April 25th. Am I right on that, Amber and Jessica?
Yes, and staff will be attending the North Carolina Public Transit Association conference, so I'd like to move it to the 25th, do the next week.
So everyone, April 25th would be the next meeting. I would say something else, but that's it. Thank you everyone for coming out this afternoon, going into the evening. I appreciate it very much, and we'll see you on April 25th. Thank you all for being here. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.